The Mariners had the non-tender deadline earlier this week, and they've somehow, despite little action, made more headlines again. Because they decided earlier this week, Lyle, to non-tender Josh Rojas, Sam Haggerty, Austin Voth, and JT Chargois, which should just be water under the bridge. So Adam Jude, who was reporting this, notes underneath his tweet saying, it clears up $8 million, which roughly doubles the Mariners' current offseason budget. And it's safe to say that threw everybody into a hurricane.
One line of one tweet, or should we say one sentence of one tweet, sent all of Mariners Twitter up in flames. Doubled? Fucking doubled their money for this offseason? What type of contending team spends $15 million in an offseason?
The Mariners.
Dude, I wrote out a long list of adjectives for ways to describe the Mariners ownership group to kick off this episode. I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to. I know we've beaten this dead horse plenty.
List?
What?
How long's the list? Did you actually write something?
No, it's about 20 words.
Oh, nice.
So,
can we get 2 words off of it?
Yeah, we can go with 3.
Since I told you to limit the complaining, we'll give you just a tiny bit of the list.
All right. Pathetic, putrid, feeble, and unserious.
I couldn't think of 4 better words.
I left about 16 on the board. What were the others? That's up for your interpretation, everybody listening.
I'm just trying to wonder why the Mariners couldn't have waited until at least the holidays, or at least the first holiday, to disappoint us.
Yeah. You know, it's one thing when it's Thanksgiving week, or if it was after Thanksgiving, I should say, because then you've had your great Thanksgiving meal. You've had your time with your family. You've had a good holiday. But instead, you have to do it leading up to Thanksgiving, a time when everybody's supposed to be joyful, in a positive mood, things to look forward to, and now we have this cloud hanging over our heads. I don't know about you, but I would have liked to have had my Thanksgiving meal first before hearing this news. Or, if you don't want to take my word for it, take it in the word of one Eric Cartman.
Well, then could we at least pull up here and get some dinner? Because I like to be wined and dined after I've been fucked.
You said it perfectly, Cartman. You said it perfectly. I would have liked to have been wined and dined first.
Cartman makes a good point. And it's the Mariners, if you just map it out. It's now that it's all laid out in front of us. It is first base, second base, third base, and another bat for $16 million. And a reliever. How exactly does that work?
It doesn't, because you cannot adequately fill 4 spots like that for $16 million and then also say you're contending for a World Series. There are things they can do, and we're going to outline it here in the next couple minutes of things they could do. But if you are trying to sell your fan base on winning a World Series, legitimately contending for it, and not just lucking into one the way the Diamondbacks did in 2023, you can't have $16 million on the books to fill 4 meaningful spots. That is the definition of an unserious org.
I will say, going into this offseason, the budget that we imagined, fair or not, which we view as egregiously unfair to all the fans who put their hard-earned money into this team and the amount they draw and their television deal from past years and et cetera. List off all the things. Needing contend, never made a World Series, all the reasons why you should spend more money. I will say, despite all of that, we did expect, given some of the verbiage, that this is about where the budget would be. They said the payroll would go up. It's never certain by how much, but if you were to ask anyone who is familiar with the situation, they would say somewhere around between $150 to $160 million. And that's right where the $16 million of quote-unquote projections lead you to. So it's not entirely surprising. It just hurt. I think, Lyle, it just hurts for a lot of people to see that essentially spelled out on what they have. And it's not hoping for like this. Actually, after all their ARB numbers, they're only at 110 million, so they have 40 million to upgrade their roster. No, we're assuming this number is going to be after they pay all of their guys raises and arbitration, and it's going to be $16 million to go after that fact. Needing 5 real positions.
Let's add this too. They've made pretty public they intend to bring back one of Carlos Santana or Justin Turner. If you spend $5 to $8 million of what's projected to be $16 million available dollars in free agency or in off-season funds, payroll, you spend half of that on one of those guys, then what? Let's say you get one of those guys, and we have said they need veterans on this team. They need leadership. Great. I'd love to sign one of those guys and bring him back. Not when your budget's $16 million, but it still feels like of utter importance to this clubhouse. But if you do that, then what? You have $8 million left to fill at second base, third base, and the bullpen? I'll give you one more scenario. Let's say they trade for Nico Horner before they sign Turner or Santana, because that's an idea that's been floated out a lot. Horner's owed $12 million this year. Then what? You have $5 million left to spend, and that's even being generous. That'd be going over the $16 million limit. So $4 million left? I don't even know if $4 million gets you Turner or Santana back. So then you've filled one spot, have third base and the bullpen still of utter importance to be filled, first base sort of filled out, not really, and maybe you have the money to bring one of your vets back, but no guarantee.
This just means they're going to have to trade prospects to either get cash in trades or trade them to offload cash from their own roster. Like, that's the two scenarios. So say you trade for Nico Horner and it's $12 million. Well, you send more prospects back to the Cubs, so they send money with Nico, and it fits within your budget, which sucks, but that's a reality right now. What if you want to clear money off your roster? Well, if you're trading away Mitch Haniger, the cost would be sending some of your prospects away with Mitch Haniger, probably actually only one prospect because it's only 1 year, but still trading a prospect and someone who could debut in the big leagues this year out of your minor league system with Mitch Haniger to clear his $15.5 million. Garver's less likely because he's actually going to be the backup catcher, and that's a guaranteed spot, unlike whatever Mitch Haniger's role they think Mitch Haniger is going to occupy next year, which you and I still have no idea how exactly that's going to work. And it frankly shouldn't work at all because it makes absolutely no sense for Mitch Haniger to be on the roster next year. But there's also one thing I think about here that I think is starting to make more and more and more sense, and I brought it up 2 weeks ago, Lyle, where if this is your scenario and you really need to find a way to finagle your budget with all of this, remember that Bo Bichette idea I threw out 2 weeks ago? That starts making a whole lot more sense if the Blue Jays are listening, where you send prospects with Mitch Haniger and essentially salary swap with Bo Bichette. It'll cost you a tiny bit more, but at least fills a need. And what the best case scenario is you get an all-star in your infield. And that's a contending move right there. All of a sudden, it seems like that's the best case scenario.
So hypothetically, you could trade Mitch Haniger and Harry Ford to Toronto and get 1 year back of Bo Bichette.
Right. What else are we supposed to do? What else are they supposed to do at this point? Because here's another option. If you want to go acquire cheap players, sure, great. But those guys are really expensive. Big league players who would be of value to you making league minimum or an early arbitration years. It's not cheap. Like we just talked about Jordan Westberg last week or 2 weeks ago. We posted it on Saturday, and Orioles fans are taking it well. We learned a lot about the Orioles fan base on Saturday. It's so funny. I post the clip in the morning, and it's game day here in Corvallis. So I'm working. I'm not looking at my phone, and middle of the game pops up, and I open it, and I'm like, holy shit. What happened? We didn't say anything that egregious. Anyways, as you can tell, Lyle, other fan bases view their league minimum good players very highly. They're not cheap. That's the situation they're in right now.
No, we were told that no Mariners starter is worth Jordan Westberg.
No, we were told it would cost Castillo, Miller, and Wu for Jordan Westberg.
Oh, yeah, I forgot. Just 3 all-star caliber starters. My bad.
Yeah, duh, Lyle. Come on. But that's the situation the Mariners are in right now. You either need to offset salaries, you either need to trade prospects for salary relief, or you need to spend the top-tier price for young players.
Yes. I hate this situation. I really, really hate the way this organization operates because you're either going to be forced to not spend any money, deal away prospects, or both.
The worst case scenario in this is we get to spring training and Jerry doesn't clear that much salary this offseason because if I was another team, I wouldn't want any part of Mitch Haniger's money. That makes absolutely no sense to acquire somebody like that. If Jerry wants to keep his prospects, he keeps the current salary, they upgrade marginally at all those positions, and they roll into spring training and tell us they really believe what they saw in the last 6 weeks of the season. And I just say, I'm sorry, I can't buy that. That's telling your fans you were unwilling to properly upgrade in the offseason just because. And that sucks. I don't want to hear that. I want to be excited going into next season and into next spring that the roster had every ounce of thought put into it. And that there's no shuffling around. I just don't think that's the case, unfortunately. And guess what? As we've said constantly throughout this offseason and into last season too, the prospects the Mariners currently have in the minor leagues aren't developed to the point, on the hitting side at least, because that's where all this concern is coming from, aren't developed enough to make that much of an impact on the roster in 2025. So it's not an option to put Cole Young at second base. All of you commenting on our Instagram posts, I love you all. We appreciate you so much. I see a lot of Cole Young and Ryan Bliss comments to play second base. I don't think the Mariners think that those guys are ready to play every day at second base next year. It's not an option. If that was an option, they wouldn't tell us that second base was a clear pressing need this offseason. The first thing they mentioned this offseason was second base. If Young and Bliss were ready, that would not be the case. But that's where we are right now.
Oh, playing Cole Young to start the year at second base is an option. It's just not a very good one because he's not ready and it would be a total disservice to his development. So yeah, it's an option. If you need somebody to play second base, it could happen. I don't think it's a very good idea. I think he needs a little more time to develop. But yeah, this is feeling a lot like last offseason again, where the vibes are so low to start. Now, they're not dealing away big league players yet, so it's not as low as last offseason, but it's not good.
It's starting to make a lot more sense that you very well could trade from your outfield. Like, this is where the Randy situation comes back up, as Ryan Divish floated on our podcast back in August after Scott got fired, that trading Randy's away for monetary reasons is what he floated there, but you look at how this roster is built, and you have so much allocated in your outfield, and you have this pressing need on your infield, all of a sudden it's not the worst thing in the world to move money and move a good outfielder away for help on your infield as well, for hopefully a similar price and a similar caliber of player. So that feels like that. I keep saying I have one more thing, and I do. Are they willing to expand the budget for someone they really like? I was listening to Extra Innings before we sat down and recorded here on Monday. Divish and Jude are pretty plugged in, and they had Jordan Schusterman on, friend of the pod, all three friends of the podcast on Extra Innings. And Divish kept bringing up that they were talking to the Blue Jays, or at least were trying to talk to the Blue Jays at the deadline about Vlad Guerrero Jr. Now, Vlad's making $25 million this year. He's expensive. He's going to be very expensive when he hits free agency. He's going to sign a long-term deal and make somebody very happy. Does the budget go up if you could get him? Like, is this rule of $16 million, does it go away if he's available? Because under the current parameters, you could not acquire him. You can't afford him. Does that change?
It should, but how do we have any idea? The Mariners can say all they want to say about, well, we changed the parameters for the right player. We've never, ever seen them do that.
Well, we won't know until they do it.
Right. But we have no past history or data points to point to and say, well, for the right guy, they'll do it. What points of history do we have to point back on in this regime, this ownership, this front office, to back that up. They balked at the money at Shohei. They're not even in on the Juan Soto sweepstakes, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Guys that should be worth it to move the budget for, and they balked on all that.
Not bats. They've done it for 2 pitchers.
But was their budget capped for Luis Castillo? I don't know about that.
No, but they wouldn't have. I don't think they would have traded for Castillo if they didn't want to extend him. That's the whole philosophy of this front office: is trade and extend.
Right, but they didn't have problems with the RSN at that point. They didn't seem to say, "Oh, we're handicapped by this." Not that this ownership was spending like crazy, or at least spending the way they should have been spending, but not the way it's been the last couple of years. Remember, Robbie Ray, the year they signed Robbie Ray, they were in on Trevor Story. They were in on some of the top-line free agents that winter, and they didn't get any of them, but they seemed to be in on them. Now, all of a sudden, over the last couple of off seasons, narrative's totally shifted.
Look, if Divish, and you and I trust Divish on what he reports, and he says they were asking the Blue Jays about Vlad with a payroll at that point that was, what, $145 million? So if they acquired him, that's $170 right there. If he is on your team and he is the player you're getting, it sounds like it could change some minds. However, there are just not a whole lot of Vlad Guerrero Jr.'s out there, and he is probably not actually available because he's not a Mariner. Because if he was actually available, again, as we stated so many times at the deadline, who is outbidding the Mariners? Who?
Probably not a lot of teams when you look at the prospect capital.
And even if someone tries to flash better prospects, the Mariners really want somebody, they're like, want a starter?
Right.
No one else can offer that.
You better be pretty sure you're extending Vladdy if that happens. But if you somehow magically land Roki Sasaki in the middle of January, maybe it becomes more possible.
Right. God, and Roki throws off this whole thing too, which I don't even think this is something we considered when we talked about Roki, but having to wait until January 15th to sign him is going to really screw up some off seasons. Not only screw up some off season, there were some articles written in The Athletic about how it's going to screw up international free agency and what could become available since of all these verbal agreements that could fall through for whoever signs him, but how it's going to affect big league free agency for these teams that are holding out for him.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
It's crazy. Last thing, by the way, if the Mariners trade Randy, like what you mentioned and like what I tweeted earlier this week, saying if that's the budget, it may very well be possible. Let's not get it twisted. They're trading him because they have budgetary problems and monetary problems. They're trading him to salary dump if they do that. It's not because of performance.
It's not because of performance. It is, I'll compare it to Brock and Salk again. This will be 2 shows in a row. I think both of them should be very happy we're spending all this time mentioning something they say, but let's use like Salk's DK example. Like, you know what I'm talking about. And he thinks the Seahawks roster is not built. It's built from the outside in. It's to be the same thing with the Mariners. Too much on the outfield grass, not enough on the infield grass in terms of where the resources are.
Yeah, but I can't buy into that. You need all the good players offensively that you can have. I don't care what positions they're playing. You need good star players. You trade Randy Arozarena off this roster this offseason, we're going to come back on this podcast, and I'm going to make every rant I've ever gone on this platform, make it seem like it was a chat over tea.
The problem with trading Randy in all reality is you don't have a DH right now.
No.
So he at the minimum he should be your DH.
Yes. Yeah. You know what this all boils down to, TJ, as we put a bow on this segment?
We're sitting here again talking about the same things.
Thank you,
Brian Kelly. He is right.